Hey guys, tonight we drift into the wind-woven world of Maori kites. Massive, intricate flying creatures that weren't just toys, weren't just art, and absolutely weren't the kind of thing you'd want to tangle in your backyard power lines. Imagine stepping into a clearing ringed with silver fern trees, the ground soft with moss, and the evening sky just beginning to blush with pink and gold. Above you, something flaps, not a bird, but a glider, as long as a canoe lifting and twisting with surprising grace. You're not watching a game, you're watching history, and it's flying. Now, this isn't your average kite festival at the park type of story. No lemonade stands, no tangled string disasters, no kids sobbing into their dad's knees. This is the story of how the Maori, the indigenous people of Aotearoa, or modern-day New Zealand, used massive kites in rituals in hunting and warfare, and sometimes in ways so poetic and bizarre you might wonder if sleep is already sneaking in behind your ears. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop a comment with your location and local time. I love seeing where you're tuning in from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You start on a ridge, a wide windswept plateau where tall grasses hiss under your feet, and birds wheel above. It's nearly sunset, and already a group is gathering carrying long bundles wrapped in woven flax, their shapes too angular and strange to be fishing rods, too slender to be spears. They are kites, or as the Maori say, manu tuku tuku, or pakau, which literally translates to bird towed by string. The people here in generations past wouldn't just launch them for fun, though fun was certainly part of it. They launched them because they believed the sky held memories, messages, answers, sometimes warnings. According to oral tradition, the sky wasn't just empty space. It was a layered living realm where ancestors dwelled and the gods of weather, war, and life itself roamed. And by flying a kite, you weren't just playing with wind, you were speaking to it. The kites you see tonight are enormous. Some stretch nearly 4 meters wide, made of painstakingly lashed reeds, and framed with supple yet sturdy toraro wood. Their surfaces shimmer with dyed bark cloth or flax leaf painted with intricate patterns in charcoal black and ochre red. One shaped like a stingray seems to glide before it even lifts. Another bird-like holds an eerie, human-like face at its center, a guardian or a trickster, perhaps both. You step closer to an elder preparing his kite, watching as he stretches the cords between outstretched arms. Each string has been soaked in oil and twined by hand. He murmurs something you don't catch and touches his forehead to the wooden spine of the kite. A blessing. A request. Historians still argue whether these pre-launch chants were standardized or deeply personal, like prayers before a voyage or a duel. What's agreed upon is that kite flying, especially of this scale, wasn't casual. There's a chill now in the air, the kind that lives near the coast and the first kite takes to the sky. At first, it wobbles like a curious dog sniffing for wind. Then it catches something invisible and shoots upward in a long, smooth arc. The crowd gasps. It climbs and climbs, and you can feel your own shoulders lift as if some thread in your chest is tied to it. And for a moment, that's all there is, the whine of the string, the gleam of stretched flax, and the hum of air folding around something that shouldn't fly but does. A child beside you jumps up and down, calling the kite's name. A woman throws a handful of feathers into the wind. Someone behind you begins to sing. And you realize this isn't a hobby. This is ceremony. This is belonging. You look down the hill and spot more figures arriving, people with bundles of their own kites wrapped in woven cloth, others already preparing to launch. This is no one-off flight. This is a gathering, a ritual. And you're right where you need to be. The wind pulls again. You lift your gaze, and now the sky is full. You tilt your head back and let your eyes trace the kites overhead, dozens. Now each with a shape that tells its own story. Some are angular and sharp-edged like floating weapons. Others ripple softly like wings caught mid-blink. The wind whistles through their frames like flutes, and below a slow chant begins to rise. It's deep, rhythmic, not meant for you, but you feel it anyway in your ribs, in your knees, even in your fingertips as they twitch with phantom string. These aren't just kites. They are messages. And the sky. That's not just a backdrop. In the Maori world, Ra, the sun, is more than a big glowing orb. He's an ancestor, a being with will, warmth, and influence. The wind, too, has many faces and names, some kind, some mischievous. And you're told as you settle into a squat next to a weathered kite flyer with gray streaks in his braids that these elements aren't just weather, they're entities. Family, even. According to tradition, the world came into being when Rangi the Sky Father and Papa the Earth Mother were pushed apart by their children. Between them, space was made, and it's in that space, that layered sky, that kites fly today. You squint into the bright sky as the wind shifts. A gust tumbles across the hilltop, and another kite lifts a slender fish shape with long trailing fins. It dances rather than soars, circling lazily, almost shyly. The elder beside you grunts in approval. That one, he mutters, has how. You glance at him. He doesn't explain, so you look again. The kite does seem alive, not just animated, but connected. In Maori, thought ho can mean wind or breath, but also spirit. Life force, the energy of a thing, be it human or inanimate. And here in this moment, even woven sticks and flax can carry how can become more than themselves when they rise into Ra's domain. That might sound mystical, and it is, but also somehow practical. Because you're learning that flying a kite isn't just a whim. It's an invocation, an acknowledgement of the forces around you, of the invisible architecture between earth and sky. And sometimes when the wind listens and the flyer is ready, the kite becomes a bridge. A thin, fluttering thread between realms. Historians still argue whether early kite ceremonies were rooted in religious doctrine or were simply framed that way later by missionaries trying to categorize indigenous practice. But no matter how you slice it, the intention was clear. These kites weren't merely decorative. They meant something. You shift your gaze again and notice one kite being prepared with particular care. It's shaped like a bird, maybe a hawk, decorated with tiny white shells woven into the flax. As it's lifted, several people kneel. One offers a chant. Another releases a small puff of smoke from a carved wooden bowl. This kite clearly has a purpose. Maybe to carry a name skyward. Maybe to request good winds for a sea voyage, or maybe to mark a goodbye. You'll never know for sure. But watching it rise smooth, slow, as if the air itself is making room, you get the sense that whatever its purpose, it has been received. Someone behind you sighs almost dreamily. Good how. The words hang there like perfume in the breeze. You glance back at the elder beside you. He nods slightly, eyes still on the sky. You realize he hasn't touched his kite yet. He's waiting, watching the wind like a seasoned gambler reads dice. You ask him how he knows when it's time. He taps his chest. It pulls here. You try to feel it too. A tug beneath the sternum, a whisper behind your ears, a current calling. You close your eyes for a moment and just listen to the wind rattling the kite frames, the chanting rising and falling like a tide, and the quiet electric space between land and air where everything hovers waiting. Not everything here can be explained, but it can be felt. And in this place where Ra watches, where wind knows your name, and where string is sacred, you're starting to understand that kites don't just fly. They belong. Your fingers brush the edge of a kite frame and it hums slightly in the breeze as if remembering something. It's light, surprisingly so, woven from Harakeka, New Zealand flax, which isn't really flax at all, but something entirely local and distinct. The Maori have cultivated and harvested harakeke for generations, splitting its tough outer fibers to braid ropes, plot mats, and yes, fashion kites that behave more like creatures than crafts. The one you're examining is small by comparison to others you've seen tonight. Maybe 1.5 meters across with tight corners and a bold swirl of red ochre across its center. The frame is made from manuka or tororaro woods, chosen not just for strength but for their spring flexible enough to ride the wind, rigid enough to hold their shape mid-flight. It's like engineering with memory foam and spider silk if both came from shrubs. You ask someone nearby, an auntie with a serious face and enormous earrings, how old this design is. She shrugs. Older than my grandmother. Maybe older than her grandmother's dreams. Fair enough. You take a step back and watch her launch it. No big flourish, no countdown. She just lifts it, lets it feel the breeze, then sends it up with a tug and a turn. It climbs like it belongs there. Maybe it does. It's hard not to marvel at how advanced these early kites are. Even without the language of physics or the diagrams of Bernoulli's principle, the Maori instinctively crafted frames with ideal tension-to-lift ratios, used tail streamers for stabilization, and balanced the tension points so that each kite could hover, dip, or wheel like a seabird on a lazy afternoon hunt. Historians agree these weren't flukes. This was skill. Generational knowledge passed through practice, not in dusty books, but by squinting at the sky, feeling the wind on your tongue, and knowing when your creation was too heavy, too tight, or just plain stubborn. Of course, that's not to say everything was always solemn. In fact, some of the earliest kite stories from Maori oral tradition describe children being scolded for making little kites from leaves and spare threads, then hiding behind boulders to launch them while adults weren't looking. Kites, it seems, were for everyone, not just priests and warriors. But play had a purpose. Even the most light-hearted afternoon launches helped refine techniques. Which knots held better? Which harakeke strands worked in strong wind? Which shapes resisted spinning themselves into oblivion? You see one child nearby whose kite keeps nosediving like a drunk pigeon. His frustration is visible, but his hands stay gentle, adjusting the line angle, shifting a stick, listening for advice from his older sister who's already got hers gliding like a leaf on a pond. Too square, she tells him. The sky doesn't like squares. He nods solemnly as if the wind were a finicky ant whose moods must be respected. And she's right. The most successful Maori kites often had bird-like angular designs. Not perfect symmetry, but a kind of organic shape that worked with turbulence rather than against it. Wings curved like albatross tails, weighted for drag center frames, just askew enough to allow pivoting mid-air. Some kites even included feathers tied into the edges or strung from the tail, not for decoration, but to create vibration. You watch one now that whistles faintly like a wooden flute caught in a breeze. That sound, someone explains, helps the flyer hear how stable the kite is. If it hisses, it's fighting the wind. If it sings, it's flowing. Your fingers itch to make one. Not from ambition really, but because it feels like crafting a bird that lives only briefly. A creature born to rise, to dance, and then inevitably to fall. But for those few moments, it touches something higher. Historians still debate whether kites had specific mythic origin stories, or if they evolved purely from observational tinkering. There are whispers of ancient figures who launched the first kites to reach the gods or taunt the clouds. One story speaks of Tauhaki, a heroic figure who climbed to the heavens, some say by ladder, others by rope, and a few by kite. And you know what? It wouldn't surprise you, because here, surrounded by this rustling congregation of windwrights and watchers, you're beginning to see that flight isn't fantasy. It's family. It is ritual. It's art. The sky for the Maori wasn't an unreachable ceiling. It was a stage. And kites, they were actors, messengers, memories with string. As one more kite lifts, this one shaped like a whale's tail, you realize how quiet everything feels now. Not solemn, not boring, just reverent. Every flap of flax, every shift in the breeze, every pull on the string, it's all part of a language. One you're slowly learning. You brush away a lock of windswept hair and squint again into the sky. There's something hypnotic about how these kites behave. Some bob with a stubborn grace, others dart and dive like hunting falcons, and a few, the truly well-made ones, hover in place with unnerving stillness, as if the sky itself has agreed to hold them. But it's not just the wind they're learning to read. Behind you, a group of children gather around a kite that's been laid out like a patient on a mat. A wiry man in a finely woven cloak gestures broadly with his hands explaining something about tail balance, the spirit of the wind, and what he calls the silent shout of the sky. You don't quite catch it all, it's half explanation, half poem, but the children nod as if it's gospel. Then one of the boys steps forward and adjusts the bracing rod on the kite. Just a touch, a whisper of a change. The teacher nods, lesson absorbed. See, to an outsider, this might look like playtime. A fun distraction on a windy day. But here in the Maori tradition, play is preparation. You're watching what could easily be mistaken for recess, but is in fact the groundwork for something much more serious: training for warriors. Flying a kite teaches patience, precision, environmental awareness, and perhaps most importantly, timing. It's the same skill set needed to stalk prey, signal across great distances, or coordinate movement silently on a battlefield. There's evidence that some Maori tribes used kites in military planning not as weapons but as tools of communication and practice. You can imagine a young rangatira, a chief in training, refining his instincts with a kite, learning not only how to lift something into the air, but how to control it even as it dances on the edge of chaos. You think back to the boy adjusting the tail weight. That's not a child guessing. That's a tactician in training. You sit beside them for a moment, listening to the snap of the flax string, the ripple of the fabric as a gust tests its seams. The group tests out different wind angles, making minor adjustments until finally the kite launches crooked at first, then smooth, steady, arching into the deeper blue above. The teacher makes a gesture, 2 fingers up, then a twist. The children echo it with small wooden paddles carved into shape. Miniature versions of weapons, but used here for directional signals. One points toward the eastern hill, another downward where a pair of adults pretend to be an enemy. The kite loops once and then climbs, signal received. Historians still argue whether these kite training exercises directly influenced actual combat maneuvers or if the relationship was more symbolic. But watching it happen now, it's easy to believe that strategy was woven into the wind itself. And it wasn't just about battle. Signal kites were used to relay messages over long distances, from hill to coast, from village to outpost. Each motion of the kite, its lift angle and sway, could be a coded phrase. All clear, return home, danger spotted. Imagine trying to decode a sentence from shadows on clouds. But these kids, they're learning to read the wind. A girl with clever eyes lets her kite out higher, tugging, waiting, twitching her fingers along the string. Her kite responds like a loyal dog, dipping and spinning at her command. Her group cheers. You grin. Meanwhile, your friend from earlier, the elder with the unmoved kite, finally stands. His arms are slow but deliberate. The children quiet themselves as if sensing a shift in the air. He lifts the kite, a bold spiral design that flares with dark red and black streaks, and lets the wind catch it. It pulls from him not like a toy, but like something eager, something wild. Up it goes, steady, calm, and proud. And suddenly, every kite in the sky feels like it has a heartbeat. This wasn't just play. This was how you joined the sky, one child whispers. That one's got mana. You look to the elder. He's not smiling, but there's pride in how he watches his creation fly. Mana in Maori culture is hard to translate. It's honor, yes. Power, presence, authority, but also spiritual weight. The feeling that someone or something matters on a level the sky respects. That kite has mana. And you're learning what it takes to have it too. Not by force, but by listening. To string, to silence, to the wind's careful breath. You lie back on the grass now, letting the blades tickle the back of your neck. Eyes squinting against the buttery light filtering through feathered clouds. The sky is full of movement. Ribbons of kite tails flicker against the wind, and their cords trace soft arcs downward to the hands that hold them. And as you watch, you realize something. These strings, They're not just tools, not just lines that tether art to earth. They're stories. You roll onto your side to watch a pair of siblings working with a particularly long cord woven so finely it almost glows in the sunlight. They're unwinding it with care, knotting little charms and feathers every few feet, each one representing something: a good harvest, a deceased ancestor, a wish for a child not yet born. Their mother sits nearby, murmuring softly, pointing occasionally to the sky and back to the string. She doesn't shout. She narrates. And you realize this isn't instruction, it's tradition. In Maori culture, the string of a kite or aho tukutuku was often treated as sacred. It wasn't just functional, it symbolized a direct link between the person flying the kite and the atua, the gods or spirits dwelling in the upper realms. The longer the string, the longer the reach. The more adorned it was, the more meaningful the message. In some cases, special knots were tied into the cord to represent names, yes, names, a person's very identity encoded into a fluttering tether and released skyward where the wind might carry it into divine ears. Historians still debate whether this practice was metaphorical or literal, whether the knots were mnemonic devices for storytelling or sincere attempts to launch human essence into the heavens. But either way, the symbolism is clear: the string is memory. You remember now how the elder from before tapped his chest to explain when to launch. That same kind of instinct seems built into the cord. It holds tension, yes, but also intention. Each tug carries emotion. Each loop around a finger becomes ritual. You crawl closer to another group who are braiding cord from raw flax strips. They scrape the fibers carefully, remove the sticky sap, then twist the strands together over their thighs, humming rhythmically as they go. The resulting rope is strong but soft. It smells faintly grassy, like earth that's been kissed by sea air. Someone lets you try. Your first attempt is lumpy, uneven, full of anxious torque. Too much thinking sees a boy no older than 10. Let the wind do some of it. You start again. Slower this time, letting your fingers follow instinct instead of blueprint. And the braid comes together like it's always known how. There's something deeply human in this act, in twisting something living into something lasting. It's a metaphor, yes, but it's also just good engineering. You glance around and notice how each person interacts with their cord differently. One loops it methodically, checking tension every few inches. Another lets it drag lightly in the grass, listening for the hum it makes when taut. A third, an old woman with silver rings on every finger, twirls her fingers midair like a spider spinning silk. Each movement is part of a language, a grammar of wind and willpower. One boy tries to yank his kite higher with a sudden jerk. The string snaps. He stares at the loose thread in disbelief. His sister cackles. Too proud, she says, brushing past him. The kite doesn't follow you, you follow the kite. That gets a chuckle from nearby adults. But she's not wrong. There's humility in this practice. You're not the master of the sky, you're a partner. Your kite might have strength, beauty, and wings. But without the string, without that constant, invisible negotiation between control and surrender, it's just a pile of sticks. You lie back again and watch one particular kite with a cord so long it fades into the clouds. It's quiet, almost imperceptible in its climb, but it keeps rising. You imagine what it must be like to tie a memory to that cord. To knot in a name, a prayer, a plea for guidance, and then let the wind take it. To trust that your grief or your gratitude could be lifted high enough to matter. The sky grows bluer now, deeper and calmer. You close your eyes and listen. A voice whispers beside you, not a real one, but one from memory. All things are connected by lines we cannot always see. You believe that now, and maybe, just maybe, the wind believes it too. The wind shifts again, and with it comes the faint scent of earth salt and the smoky whisper of driftwood burning somewhere behind the ridge. You don't turn to look, you don't need to. Everything you need to see is already up there, fluttering in the sky. And now you notice something strange. One kite near the edge of the group isn't shaped like a bird or a stingray or a whale tail. It's different, longer, almost dragon-like, with a spine that curve subtly, and fabric panels stretched between ribs like sails on a ghostly canoe. And the string, it's black, not dyed, just burnished, rubbed with soot or ash, until it looks like a shadow being pulled taut across the sky. You wander closer, half crouched to keep out of its wind path. A man stands there, younger than the elders, but older than the kids. His arms are tattooed with spirals. His face calm in the way only those who know what they're doing ever manage. The kite tugs sharply eager. He's using it for hunting. Now, that's not something you expected. But according to tradition, especially in more remote or forested areas of Aotearoa, kites weren't just for stories or sky whispers. Some were used to lure or distract birds during a hunt. Imagine standing in a clearing, waiting with your sling or spear while your cousin launches a flapping decoy into the air, one that mimics the movement of a hawk or another predator. If you're lucky, a panicked flock will rise into the open. And if you're clever, well, dinner might be on the fire before the sun's gone down. Historians still argue how widespread kite hunting actually was, or whether it was more of a regional innovation passed down quietly among select iwi. But the principle makes sense. You mimic the predator, stir the prey, and seize your moment. A kite as tool, as bait, as camouflage, in reverse. The man lets out more line than makes the kite dip sharply, almost pouncing in midair. You watch him twist his wrist slightly. The kite swoops again, more aggressive this time, the tail snapping behind it like a warning. You imagine a cluster of unsuspecting caribou, those fat native pigeons waddling in the underbrush and suddenly looking up to see what might be a raptor circling overhead. They panic, they take flight, and the hunter below, poised and patient, picks one from the sky. Efficient, elegant, ancient, and frankly kind of brilliant. You glance back at the other kites. They're ceremonial, symbolic, but this one has teeth. The man finally lets it drift down with care, hands it off to a boy who bundles it in soft cloth like a sleeping baby. Not a toy, a tool. And next to him, a different woman is preparing yet another sort of kite. This one with strings attached not just to her hand, but also down the length of her cloak. She's going to wear it. You blink. She walks to the edge of a steep bluff where the wind rolls upward like the breath of a sleeping mountain. Her cloak spreads behind her, full of struts and seams. The kite is shaped more like wings, now folded around her like a secret. And then she leaps. Not to fall, not to fly exactly, but to glide. Your stomach flips and you stumble forward thinking maybe you've just witnessed something tragic. But no, she lands. She lands, skidding on her feet, stumbling a bit, but upright. The crowd cheers. You are amazed and slightly alarmed. Was that real? You ask someone next to you who laughs and says, not all kites stay on strings. Apparently, among some Maori legends, there were stories of people, especially tohunga, or specialists in sacred knowledge, who used kite-like cloaks to move between cliffs or descend into valleys without needing to climb. Now, historians are very skeptical here. There's no archaeological proof of gliding cloaks and no written record from early colonizers that confirm anything quite so cinematic. But in the oral tradition, it pops up more than once, usually in connection with ritual journeys or sky ancestor tales. Maybe it's myth. Maybe it's memory exaggerated over time. Or maybe, just maybe, it was real. You watch the woman climb back up the slope, panting and laughing. Her cloak folded back into something resembling a sail. She waves at the kids who beg her to do it again. She promises them maybe after food. You can't stop smiling. Because now, you see how versatile, how deeply embedded these kites are in every part of life here. Not just for messages, not just for mourning or for gods, but for hunting, for exploration, for joy. A child near you whispers, "One day I'll fly all the way to Ranjanui." You look up at the kite still circling overhead, and for a heartbeat you believe it's possible. You sit now with your back against a sun-warmed rock, a flat piece of bread in one hand and your thoughts drifting skyward just like the kites overhead. The air is quieter in this little hollow, but not silent. There's always the pulse of wind, the rustle of leaves, and the soft, persistent creak of flax rope in motion. Near you, an older woman with a face like riverbed stone and a voice like soft gravel is telling stories to a cluster of children. Not loudly, not performatively, just enough for the wind to carry her words into curious ears. You lean in too. She's talking about Marama the moon, and how once long ago a kite was made not for the sky but to find her. The story goes something like this. A Tohunga seeking wisdom from the celestial bodies crafted a kite from bird bones and dreams. Yes, dreams, because that's what he told his people the threads were made of. He launched it on a cloudless night, hoping the moon would see the kite and send down answers tied in silver light. Whether she did or not isn't the point. The story's about trying, about reaching, because that's what kites do. They reach. You glance up again. There's a tall, thin kite being launched, now shaped almost like a finger pointing skyward. On its surface are woven patterns, tukutuku panels, the kind you normally see in meeting houses. Geometric lines, diamond shapes, interrupted grids. Yads. They tell a story too if you know how to read them. This one, someone tells you, represents a genealogy. An ancestral line passed down from the sky to the sea, with each zigzag, a different chief, each not a birth or death. You're stunned. The sky is literally holding someone's family tree. And again, the string matters. It was the custom sometimes for kites flown in memorial ceremonies to carry names, either spoken during flight or knotted into the line itself as if the person's identity could hitch a ride to the heavens. Kites might be flown at funerals or anniversaries. Some were destroyed after flight, never to be used again. Others were passed down like heirlooms. Historians still argue whether these mourning practices were universal or specific to certain iwi. Some suggest they were influenced over time by European mourning rituals, but most agree in Maori belief the veil between worlds is thin, especially when the wind is right. So it makes sense that kites would become messengers. You turn back to the elder. She's holding a small round kite now, less a tool, more a token. Its pattern is delicate with soft blues and pale yellow threads like sun-faded cloth. She whispers to it, just once, then tosses it into the air. It lifts, spirals once, then catches a quiet current and floats out of sight. No ceremony, no applause, just a goodbye. One of the kids asks, "Who was that for?" The elder doesn't answer, just closes her eyes and smiles. You stay there a while watching the last glimmer of that kite become a speck, then a memory, then nothing at all. This place, this tradition, it isn't about spectacle. It's about connection between people, between worlds, between the living and the dead. And the thread between them all is flax wind and a bit of sky-born hope. Nearby, two women begin weaving a new kite, speaking quietly. One thread is red, the other white. The pattern slowly reveals itself. Spirals of movement like waves curling toward the shore. You're told this one is for a journey, not an actual voyage, but a metaphorical one. A young man about to leave the village for good. The kite will carry his name, his intentions, maybe a little of his fear. And above them, the sky stretches open, generous and ready. For some people, wind is just weather. But for the Maori, it's a channel, a way to speak without sound, to release things too heavy to carry, to let grief rise and transform into flight. The wind has picked up a little now. Nothing dramatic, just a constant hush, brushing through the hills like a gentle broom sweeping the air clean. It's the kind of breeze that feels like it has a personality. Not quite playful, not quite serious, just present, old, watching. You follow a small path down toward a flat open field. The ground here is worn and trampled, clearly a place of frequent activity. You can see faded footprints, smooth patches where kites must have landed, and a dozen or so poles lined up in two neat rows. From a distance, they look ceremonial. Up close, they're very clearly functional. Each pole is different. Some are carved with faces. Others are wrapped with old rope or feathers. They sway, slightly creaking as the wind pushes against them. An older man stands nearby rubbing his chin with a piece of driftwood as if in thought. He gestures to the poles and says, "This is where we test the gods." You blink. He doesn't elaborate. Instead, he walks to the center of the field and begins tying a kite to one of the poles, not to fly it, but to anchor it. You watch puzzled until he explains this is a contest. Turns out some Maori tribes held annual or seasonal kite flying contests. Not the kind with judges and trophies, but with bragging rights, friendly rivalries, and plenty of sly smiles. These events weren't just about engineering, they were about reading the land, the wind, and sometimes each other. Each kite was tied down to a pole. The goal wasn't height, it was resistance, endurance. Which kite would withstand the strongest gusts, pull hardest against its tether, or survive the longest in the air before collapsing in a crumpled heap? You watch as others start arriving. Some carry kites tucked under cloaks. Others are already attaching strings to their poles, checking knots, fussing over balance and angle. No one shouts. Everyone moves with quiet intensity like chefs trying to perfect a secret recipe before the dinner rush. A young girl barely taller than your waist unrolls a tiny spade-shaped kite and whispers something to it before tying it to her pole. You ask what she said. She shrugs. You have to ask the wind, not me. There's a long silence before the first flyer launches. It's subtle, a light pull, a little shimmy, and then the kite rises like it's being remembered. Others follow. Soon the field is full of tension, each pole straining slightly as the kites catch the breeze and tug against their cords, bowing just enough to remind you that the sky always pulls back. Some kites twist violently, others flutter like wounded birds. A few remarkably hold steady, no fuss, no wobble, just stillness in motion. You feel your muscles tense without meaning to. You're rooting for them, but the wind has no favorites. One by one, kites begin to fail. A string snaps here. A wing folds in there, a tail whips itself into a knot. The girl's little spade kite holds out longer than most, but eventually it begins spinning wildly, then hopelessly before it flops to the earth like a tired leaf. Only two remain. One is large, too large, you think. It bows and lurches, clearly powerful but clumsy. The other is narrow and almost plain. It doesn't rise high, but it doesn't flinch either. They tug against their poles as if in a quiet argument, and then the wind lurches. A gust like a sneaky wave off a lake, unexpected, strong, and full of teeth. The big kite goes first, not in a blaze of glory, but a single heart-wrenching snap. The tail whips forward. The body flips and flattens. The crowd murmurs. All eyes go to the plain kite. It dips, trembles, then holds. The pole groans, but the string doesn't give. The tail flickers like a tongue tasting victory. And that's it. No cheers, just nods. A few murmured comments. One elder claps once slowly. This was never about winning. It was about understanding something larger than you. You find yourself quietly impressed, not just by the kite, but by the ritual, the calm. Historians still argue whether these contests were formalized games or spontaneous gatherings. Some claim they were metaphors for tribal strength. Others say they mirrored creation stories, each kite a stand-in for deities contending with chaos. One account suggests the final standing kite symbolized the balance between earth and sky, between restraint and freedom. That to fly, one must also be willing to be held. You find that oddly comforting. The plain kite continues to drift in wide, lazy arcs, still tethered, still dancing, like a lesson you didn't know you needed. Later in the afternoon, as the sky shifts to a softer shade of blue and the wind hums like a satisfied cat, you wander past the edge of the main field. The laughter and fluttering kites grow distant behind you, and you enter a quieter zone where the air feels thicker with memory. There's a grove of trees here, tall, sparse, and rustling, just enough to make you glance up every few seconds. But it's not the trees that hold your attention. It's the row of tatara posts carved and weathered, each one with a kite folded at its base like a sleeping creature. These are not active flyers. They are retired, honored. A woman sitting on a low stool gestures for you to come closer. Her hands are busy mending a tear in one kite's belly, but her eyes never leave the line of carved posts. She tells you this is the resting place, a sort of cemetery, but not in the sad, sobbing sense you might imagine. More like an archive. Each post marks a kite that has served a meaningful role. Maybe it carried a prayer during a crisis. Maybe it honored a beloved elder who passed. Or maybe it was the first kite made by someone who's now a respected craftsman. You notice that each post is etched with symbols, some you recognize as birds or fish, others as abstract patterns. The woman explains their coded stories. You're standing in a library written in windwalkers. One particular post stands taller than the others. Its base is wider. The kite next to it is older than the rest, mildewed, yes, and brittle, but still elegant. Deep red fibers, nearly black now with age. The frame is carved with tiny notches too many to count. That one, she says, was flown the night we lost our mountain. She doesn't explain what that means. You don't ask. Instead, you sit beside her watching as she smooths out the wing of the kite she's repairing. Her hands are slow, careful. It's not just maintenance, it's ritual. The string she's using is braided with what looks like human hair. You raise an eyebrow. She grins. My daughter's, from when she first flew this one. We always tie something living into it. Historians still debate whether kites were ever considered vessels for actual wairu, the spirit. Some oral traditions treat them that way, others less so. It's unclear if the hair braiding is symbolic or believed to truly link the flyer and the kite in a metaphysical sense. But you're not here to win a debate. You're here to feel it. And it feels real. You help her for a while. Not with anything important, just passing thread holding corners, flat, smoothing out creases. She hums as she works a tune that rises and falls like a lullaby and seems older than the trees. She tells you that her grandfather once flew a kite to choose a name. He let it rise until the wind tugged it hard in one direction. Then he followed that pull to a certain clearing where he found a bird feather, a strange plant, and a freshwater spring. The baby was named for all three. That's not science. That's not even logic. But it's beautiful. You glance again at the tall kite, the one that flew during the mountain story. It hasn't flown in years, she says. It never will again. But sometimes when the wind is strong and just the right amount of warm, she swears she hears it moving. Not creaking, not rustling, flying. You believe her. Why not? You've seen people fly themselves off cliffs with woven cloaks. You've seen grief lifted into blue silence. You've seen a child tie a string to a secret and let it vanish into cloud. What's one more miracle in a sky full of them? You thank her and move on. The field behind you is still alive with motion. Kids are shrieking, running, testing tail lengths. An elder points with a walking stick, giving advice no one seems to hear. Someone burns a small fire and lays food nearby, an offering to either the gods or the birds, or maybe just the memory of what was. You turn once more to look at the grove of kite memorials, and for a second it almost looks like the posts are swaying. But of course, they're not. Unless they're remembering something you haven't yet learned. You return to the main gathering place. Your steps slow not from fatigue, but from a kind of reverence that's begun to settle over you like a woven cloak. The wind is steadier now, more confident, less fickle. The kind of breeze that seems to carry not just air but meaning. In the center of the field, a group of Tohunga respected experts in spiritual matters are assembling what looks like a ceremonial kite. It's enormous, wider than your outstretched arms and tall enough that one person has to stand on a carved wooden box just to reach the upper struts. The material used isn't cloth this time. It's thin bark out, the paper mulberry beaten and softened, then reinforced with strips of bird bone and finely plaited flax. Its surface gleams with an ochre sheen as if kissed by both sun and smoke. But what holds your attention isn't the size or the craftsmanship. It's the silence. No one is laughing here, no one's playing. This kite isn't for fun. It's for the gods. A hush spreads across the gathering like fog curling in from the sea. Children are ushered back. Even the dogs lie down and watch with their ears flat and alert. You sit cross-legged near the edge, eyes wide. This is a ritual launch. The kind reserved for major events, a successful season, a new chief's initiation, or perhaps a petition to the Atua, the sky spirits asking for guidance or forgiveness. Two Tohunga step forward. One holds a carved staff. The other carries a stone, small, round, smooth. They each touch the kite with their free hand, whispering something in unison. Then the staff is placed on the ground upright, its shadow pointing true north. That's the signal. 3 people, 2 adults, and a boy begin feeding out the string. It's thicker than the others you've seen today, reinforced with tufts of dog fur, dyed black at the base and white at the tip. Decorative, yes, but also symbolic. White for light, black for shadow, all held together in a single trembling line. The kite shudders once, twice, and then, with no great flourish, just a shared breath from the crowd, it lifts. Slow at first, then steadier, up and up. You feel something tighten in your chest as it rises. There's a difference in how it flies. Not just its trajectory, but its posture, its stillness. It moves with intention, like it knows it's being watched, like it's carrying more than mere air in its frame. Someone nearby murmurs, "This one carries the name of the dead." You glance at them. They nod toward a carved wooden plank standing nearby, half hidden in the grass. On it is a spiral flanked by 2 lines that resemble wings. At the center, a small set of symbols, likely a name, or many. Historians still puzzle over how names were encoded onto kites in these ceremonies. Was it symbolic through color and form, or literal, with written glyphs or knot arrangements? Some say chants were tied into the act, the sound carried skyward by the kite's wake. Others suggest the names were never spoken aloud to keep them sacred. You watch the kite hit a new current and begin drifting eastward, where the sea glints just beyond the trees. And then something remarkable happens. A second kite, smaller, quieter, rises nearby. You hadn't even noticed it being prepared. It takes a slow arc, rising higher, and begins following the ceremonial kite, not quite catching up, but never falling too far behind. It's a companion, a witness. Someone whispers that one carries the questions. You don't even ask what that means, you just accept it. 2 kites drifting side by side, one holding memory, the other bearing doubt. A third begins to rise now, bright red with long tails. It wobbles a little, clearly newer, perhaps even flown by a less experienced hand. But it joins the other 2 anyway, spiraling close, then steadying. They never fly alone, someone says, and you realize this isn't just about reaching up. It's about staying connected, even in the sky, even in silence. You lie back again, arms folded behind your head, eyes tracing the 3 forms above. The wind has quieted slightly, as if the world is holding its breath. Below, you hear the soft crunch of flax sandals. The Tohunga are packing up. The ceremony is done. But the kites are still up there, still flying. Not like toys, not like messages, like beings. You remember what the elder woman said earlier, how some kites are never flown again, and others seem to move even when still. This feels like both, a ritual and a presence. Evening creeps in, not like a curtain, but like a rising tide, soft, inevitable, and strangely kind. The blue of the sky deepens into something moodier, richer. Shadows grow longer, and still some of the kites remain aloft, tails flickering against the dusk, like tired comets. You find yourself wandering uphill, now, led not by any guide, but by the path the wind seems to suggest. It's not steep, just steady. A slope that reminds you with every step how much sky you've already walked beneath today. At the crest, you pause. Below you, the village, the open field, the hush of kites against the wind like so many silk whispers. But ahead of you, a new shape. It's a frame, not a kite this time, but something like a gate. 2 tall poles driven into the earth, topped with a crossbeam made of driftwood, lashed with sea rope. From the beam hang dozens of kite fragments. Torn tails, snapped struts, sun-bleached wings, and faded bits of twine braided into dangling spirals. This is a threshold. You step under it, not entirely sure why, just drawn. And there on the other side is something even stranger. A man is standing in front of a stone slab. On it, a series of small, meticulously arranged bones. Bird bones, fish spines, maybe even fragments of shell. You blink. It's a kite design laid flat on the rock like a blueprint. The bones form the outline of a large body, tapered tail, and arched wings. But this kite will never fly. He tells you almost offhandedly that this is a dream map. You try not to look confused. Some Maori kite makers, he explains, never built certain kites with their hands. They only imagined them, crafted them in thought, laid them out in temporary materials like bone or sand or leaves, then let the design be taken by wind or rain. An offering of creativity with no expectation of permanence. Historians still debate the purpose of these ephemeral designs. Were they sketches, meditation's teaching tools, or were they a form of skywriting laid on the earth so that the gods could see from above? You step closer. Each bone glints faintly in the dimming light. The man asks if you'd like to make your own. You hesitate, then kneel. He hands you a handful of small shells, a split feather, and a stick of charcoal. You arrange them slowly. The design that emerges isn't elegant, not even symmetrical, but it's yours. A stubby tail, wide wings, and a center frame that looks suspiciously like a crooked ladder. He nods, doesn't correct a thing. Nice, he says, looks like a question. You grin, not an answer. He shrugs. Same thing sometimes. You sit together in silence as the breeze begins to scatter the pieces. One shell rolls off the slab. The feather lifts gently, then flutters away like it's just remembered it used to belong to something that could fly. You feel an odd peace watching your not kite disappear. There's something sacred in letting go of something you just made. You remember earlier when you saw kites being retired. Some kept forever, others burned or buried, but some like yours never meant to be kept at all. Just thought not thing. Art that is only ever temporary. Wind art. And then the man points upward where the last ceremonial kite is just beginning to descend. Not falling, just returning. He says no kite lives in the sky, not forever. You nod. You understand now. Because everything here, the carving, the string, the rituals, even the mistakes, is built on the idea that connection doesn't last because it's held, but because it's remembered. Like flight. You get up. The bones of your kite scatter behind you like breadcrumbs. The wind whisks away the last piece of charcoal, and the hill feels taller on the way down. Not heavier, just older. You make your way down from the hill, slowly watching your feet for roots and loose stones, but also letting your gaze drift upward every few steps. It's hard not to. The sky has taken on that twilight blue, the color that always seems one shade too rich to be real. And there are still a few kites aloft, no longer energetic or wild, but gliding like the last pages of a good book. In the half-light, the wind has changed character. It's no longer a companion or a guide. It's become a whisper, a storyteller wrapping itself around your ears and cheeks full of unfinished sentences and the scent of distant rain. As you re-enter the village proper, you hear a low hum coming from a group gathered near a fire. The flames flicker against their faces, highlighting sharp cheekbones, tattooed chins, and eyes that reflect 1,000 kites they have seen rise and fall in their lifetimes. This isn't celebration or mourning, it's recitation. One woman wrapped in a thick feathered cloak is holding something flat in her lap. Not a kite, not exactly, but a paddle-shaped panel covered in etched designs and tiny inlaid stones. A memory board, you realize. She's pointing to each mark with a bone needle recounting the life of a particular kite, the ceremonies. It's seen the people. It honored the days it refused to fly. Everyone listens as if it's the most obvious thing in the world that a kite could have a biography. You sit quietly nearby. A younger man notices your presence and leans over to whisper, "This one belonged to a Tahunga who made a kite that sang." You blink. Sang. He nods, not with a voice, with the sound of its flight. Apparently, some kite makers deliberately crafted kites to make noise, either through fluted bones, whistling reeds, or tails that slapped against the wind in rhythm. These weren't just aesthetic choices, they were coded messages, A low flutter meant harmony. A high screech might warn of imbalance. And sometimes they just sang for the joy of it. Historians still argue whether these sonic kites were used in warfare ritual or personal meditation. Some accounts suggest they helped time planting cycles or marked seasonal changes. Others claim they were simply beautiful noise machines letting people know that even the wind wanted to speak sometimes. The idea of wind carrying a song intentional composed delicate sticks with you. You close your eyes and try to imagine it. The rustling reed tails vibrating at high frequency, catching gusts at just the right angles. The hollow struts echoing like flutes. A chord that lives only in the air. You ask the man if anyone still makes them. He smiles but doesn't answer, which around here feels like the same as saying yes. Back near the fire, a few children are tracing the shapes on the memory panel, copying them onto soft bark with charcoal. It's a kind of bedtime ritual remembering through repetition. One girl draws a kite with spiral wings. Another draws one that looks like a starfish. A boy draws a big one, almost comically large, with lightning bolts for tails and a frowning face on its body. You ask what that one's called. He says the wind eater. You nod solemnly, like that's an absolutely normal answer. He adds, "It's not real." Yet, you grin, yet you repeat, and suddenly you understand something. In this place, the line between memory and invention is a string. Long, taut, and swaying just enough to blur the past and the possible. The fire crackles. Someone starts a soft chant. You lean back, close your eyes, and for just a moment the wind slips past your ear in a pitch so precise, so eerie it almost sounds like a note. And maybe, just maybe it is. Darkness has settled now. Not the kind that slams down like a curtain, but the kind that creeps in soft and unhurried, like a thoughtful relative who doesn't want to interrupt. The moon hovers low over the hills, shy behind a veil of cloud, casting the village in shades of pewter and indigo. You walk slowly through the village paths. It's quieter now. Most people have retreated into homes or to fireside gatherings. The kites once dominant in the sky are gone, retrieved, packed away, or let go. You half expect to hear them still up there, but the silence is complete intentional. You reach a small clearing behind one of the longhouses where an old man is sitting cross-legged in front of an enormous coil of string. Not a kite in sight, just string. Miles of it from the look of things. Some dyed red, some black, some natural flax. It's tangled in places, looped in others, and tied with so many small knots, it looks like the world's slowest braid. He gestures to a nearby mat. You sit. He doesn't say anything at first, just hands you a small wooden bobbin and a loose end of string. So you begin to wind it. And as you do, he begins to talk, not loudly, just a voice meant for one person and the night. He tells you that this is the sky map. It's not literal, of course. But each segment of string represents a flight, a story, a moment. This bundle contains the memory of 100 kites. Where they flew, how they failed, what they were made from, who held the string. You keep winding. Every knot has meaning. Some represent storms, others laughter. One, he says, marks the time someone tied 2 kites to the same string and pretended they were married. That knot is particularly messy, as if the kites had differing opinions on the matter. Historians still debate whether these sky maps were widespread practice or highly individual. Some say they were a form of mnemonic record-keeping, a way to pass on knowledge through tactile memory rather than text. Others argue they were symbolic, an artistic form of emotional cartography, charting where the spirit had traveled. But this man, he just calls it the line I've lived by. You wind a little slower now, more reverently. He points to a knot wrapped in bark. That one was the day the wind didn't come. You pause, unsure what to say. He just smiles. Sometimes that's the story. You finish your bobbin. He nods in approval and sets it aside like it's a sacred thing. Then he hands you a tiny sliver of bone. Your turn, he says. You frown, unsure. He explains, make your own knot. A memory of this day, of your kite, your thoughts. Doesn't matter if you flew one. The sky felt you. You tie a simple loop, pull it tight. He slides it into this massive string, pressing it between two larger knots like a word tucked into a sentence already in progress. There he says, "Now the wind owes you something." You chuckle. "What kind of debt?" He leans back. "Maybe just a good breeze on a bad day." You sit in silence after that, staring at the pile of memories masquerading as twine. You wonder how many other people have contributed to it. How many thoughts are wound in those loops? How many unspoken hopes are wrapped around that bark, that hair, that bone? It's a reminder that the story doesn't have to end just because the kite came down. Sometimes the real flight happens when you're back on the ground remembering, feeling the pull even without a string in your hand. By now your steps are softer, the night air wrapping itself around your shoulders like a feathered cloak. The village seems to have entered a collective hush, not quite sleep, but that lovely middle stage where even time takes a long, slow breath. You walk along a moonlit path between tall grasses. Fireflies wink lazily around your ankles like sleepy punctuation marks. And ahead, you see something unexpected, movement gentle but precise. A group of young people are gathered in a loose circle. In the center, a girl no older than 12 is holding a small kite aloft, but she's not flying it. She's dancing with it. The kite is tethered to a short length of string, and she twirls it around herself like a ribbon on a gymnast's wand. It dips, it spins, it flutters. Occasionally, it lifts a foot into the air before tumbling back down. Not from clumsiness, but from some deeper choreography known only to her. You sit in the grass and watch. Someone leans over and murmurs, "We call this wind dancing." You nod like that makes complete sense. Apparently, in some Maori traditions, rare and not universally practiced kites weren't always meant to fly high or far. Some were created for close-range performance designed to move with the rhythm of the body, almost like puppets or extensions of the dancer's own breath. This kind of performance isn't for spectacle, it's for connection. The string here isn't meant to control, but to converse. She moves with total ease, her bare feet patting lightly on the earth, the kite spinning near her shoulder like a curious bird. The onlookers are quiet, not solemn, not tense, just caught in the spell of it. Historians still argue whether this form of wind dance was purely ceremonial, or if it evolved out of practical games or storytelling. Some suggest it may have originated as a ritual for rain, where each movement was meant to invite clouds by mimicking the swells of air. You prefer the theory that it started because someone just liked the way their kite moved when they spun around. After all, not every tradition needs a sacred origin. Some just need joy. The girl finishes her dance with a slow turn, lifting the kite until it hovers like a question, then slowly lowers it to the ground. No one claps, but a quiet hum of appreciation moves through the group like shared breath. Another boy steps forward. His kite is longer, snake-like. He doesn't dance so much as fight with it, leaping, pulling, twisting the air into wild shapes. Still silent, still gentle, still connected. This is a new kind of ritual. You close your eyes for a moment and imagine trying it yourself. What kind of kite would you dance with? Something slow and patient, or quick and mischievous? Would your string be taut with worry or loose with laughter? You think back to the knot you tied in the elder's sky map. Maybe you were wind dancing a little already just without knowing it. You open your eyes. The boy's performance is finishing. The group hums again. Someone else takes the space. This one has a twin-tailed kite, and they whirl it above their head like a ceiling fan possessed by poetry. The tails arc around in perfect rhythm with their hips, and you realize this isn't about flight or height or wind speed. It's about relationship. The kite doesn't need to escape into the clouds to be meaningful. It can move right here within arm's reach and still say everything worth saying. When the third performance ends, the dancers gather in a small huddle. You expect them to begin packing up, but instead they hand you a kite. It's small, handmade, slightly frayed at the tips. One of them gestures toward the empty center. Your turn. You shake your head instinctively. I wouldn't know how. They shrug. It's just walking with flair. So you stand. You hold the string loosely. You take one slow step, then another. The kite wobbles uncertain, then spins lazily to one side. You pivot. It follows. And just like that, you're dancing. Badly, but lovingly. Your feet remember nothing and everything. You move as if you've been waiting to do this your whole life, and only just now got the invitation. The onlookers smile, not because you're graceful, but because you're trying. The kite lifts in one slow, breathy arc. It flutters. You do too. The wind slows to a hush, almost bashful, as you finish your tentative twirl. The kite in your hand dips gently, no longer pulled by velocity, but by the growing weight of stillness in the air. Around you, the dancers offer soft nods of approval. No praise, no teasing, just acknowledgement that you joined the current, even if only for a moment. You hand the kite back with a quiet smile and step out of the circle, your feet barely making a sound on the cool, packed earth. The clearing empties slowly. Not in a rush, just a natural dispersal, like embers drifting from a fire that's done what it came to do. The village glows dimly now, its few lanterns swaying in the breeze, the homes tucked into the folds of the land like sleeping animals. Even the stars above seem quieter, blinking in slow rhythm. You find yourself walking toward the edge of the village where the trees lean a little closer and the hills frame the sky like a cradle. One last path leads to a small outcrop of rock overlooking a dark, still lake. You sit, and for a long time you do nothing. Just breathe. The wind here is gentler, less playful, more considerate. It moves your hair softly like it's checking in, asking how your day was. And you want to answer, but you also don't want to break the silence. You look out over the lake and think about all the kinds of kites you saw today. Giant hunting kites, ritual offerings, whistling sky creatures, dancers, dream maps, and string maps that chart not where you go, but how you feel while going there. You remember the tohunga with the ceremonial kite and how it lifted so quietly, as if it knew it was being watched by more than just people. You think of the child who drew a frowning kite called the Wind Eater and said it wasn't real yet. You think of the bone sliver you tied into that massive string coil and how it felt like handing the sky your business card. You think of the kite you danced with clumsily, joyfully, reverently, and you realize something flight isn't just altitude. It's memory, it's ritual, it's curiosity, it's trust. Historians still argue whether Maori kite making was primarily practical, spiritual, seasonal, or ceremonial, whether it was adapted from Polynesian roots or invented anew with every generation, whether certain kite shapes meant war, peace, joy, mourning. The truth, as usual, probably lies somewhere in the middle. But the wind doesn't care about scholarly consensus. The wind just waits, ready to lift whatever you're willing to let go of. You lie back on the smooth stone and look up. There's nothing in the sky now. No kites, no birds, just stars. Still, you can't help but imagine them tethered. Each one with a thin, invisible line reaching down to earth, anchored in memory, braided with intention. And you wonder, what kind of kite are you? Not the highest, not the flashiest, but maybe the kind that listens to the wind before tugging back. The kind that doesn't mind dipping low or staying close to the ground. The kind that waits for the right moment not to rise, but to mean something when it does. You close your eyes, and in that drifting space between wakefulness and dreaming, you feel it again. A tug on your chest. Soft, playful, promising. Like someone somewhere just took hold of your string. The wind is quieter now, barely there. Just the faintest pressure on your cheek, like a whisper that forgot its words. You're lying on that same outcrop of stone, the earth cool beneath your back, and the night air soft enough to fold into. The stars have shifted just slightly, drifting westward, inch by inch, like sleepy boats on an ink-dark sea. You trace their path with your eyes, letting their gentle rhythm lull you deeper into stillness. You hear the faintest rustle in the trees. Not a warning, just the sound of branches remembering how to sway. The lake below is glassy perfect. So still it seems to reflect not just the sky but the silence itself. Your breath slows. The weight of the day falls away, not heavy but earned. You feel yourself anchored in this moment. The wind has carried stories, laughter, memory. And now it carries you gently, softly, not to anywhere in particular, just away from noise and closer to calm. The kites may be resting now, their strings coiled, their tails tucked, but they're still with you. In memory, in motion, In the part of you that knows how to let go and trust the lift. Sleep is near. It waits at the edge, kind and unhurried. Let it come. You've flown enough for today.